What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Alex Cuesta Show. How is everybody doing out there on this Wednesday, February 11th, 2026, episode number 190? Hello, everybody out there. For those keeping score at home, no, David is not here. Don't know if David's going to be popping on, to be quite honest. He has his work schedule all screwed up. He may end up sleeping through. He may not. We might see him. Who knows? He's David. He comes in and out as he pleases. But I appreciate everyone that's watching, wherever you're watching from, whether it's YouTube X, Facebook, Kick, or Rumble. Make sure you smash that like button, you subscribe, you follow, you do all that good stuff. And also go find us on the socials at the Alex Cuesta Show. So I want to say hello already. Caveat ties, Nate. What's going on, everybody? I appreciate you guys. What does David do for work? David is a wastewater treatment worker, but he works overnights typically, and his schedule got a little miffed up. So he is basically in recovery mode, trying to get his sleep back together. So we'll give him a little bit of leeway, I guess. We'll see if we like him for a little bit. Maybe not. I really don't like him that much. But last week, I had a ton of fun. Talked to Olivia Dasovic. She has her YouTube page going on. Everyone should definitely be subscribing over to Olivia. And we just got absolutely rolling, talking about the whole entire Elijah Schaefer debacle, and what it means for the trad scene, content creation, women in the conservative space. It was a really good convo. And I encourage everyone to go over there and make sure you give that a watch if you haven't yet. But this week, I'm excited to invite this gentleman on. And this was always, it's one of those things where I saw his content, I enjoyed it. And typically I don't scroll through too much TikTok, but every once in a while I'll scroll. And for the For You, he just kept popping up. He kept popping up. I watched a little bit and he did some funny banter. And then I'm like, this guy sounds pretty smart and pretty cool and pretty damn based. So I wanted to bring him on. So let's do it. Let's bring him in. Everybody say hello to the man known as Dr. Sweater, also Stephen Mitchell. What is going on?
Hey, how are you doing, Alex? Nice to be on.
I'm doing well. So I have to ask right away, why Dr. Sweater? Where did that come from?
So I started this account my TikTok account right at about 2 years ago because I'd written a book on Genesis. Okay. And I'd heard, you got to have a social media presence if you want to market a book. So literally 3 days into the new account, I just was bombarded by all these hateful anti-Christian atheists.
Yeah.
And one of them tried to insult me by calling me Dr. Sweater because I guess I was wearing the sweater a lot, right? It's my favorite sweater. So I thought, that's pretty cool.
It's always good when you take the insults, you take the hate, and then you make it your own. It completely and totally takes the power away from the individual trying to insult you. And interestingly enough, another individual, Caveat Ties over there, Wallen, I had him on the show. He's also an author. And he's a really cool dude. So I'm pretty sure, Wallen, you'll enjoy this show listening to me and Dr. Sweater talk. So first and foremost, I just want to, real quick, the Nancy Guthrie situation is insane. What's going on there? What's going on with Savannah Guthrie and all that family is suffering. As of now, I don't know if you've seen anything different. They still don't have Savannah's mother back. And I know there's a lot of hubbub, a lot of commenting about the videos, the way they look, and conspiracy theories. To me, I don't care about any of that. I just want Nancy Guthrie to come back safe and whatever it takes. Have you been keeping tabs on that whole situation?
I follow the headlines and I'm just shocked at how little information there is.
Yeah.
Whoever did this must have really known what they were doing because they have apparently left no evidence whatsoever that could be followed. And I'm sure, these aren't amateur investigators that are on this case.
No.
These are the best of the best that are on it. And they found nothing as far as I can tell.
Yeah, it's a really weird situation. For me, it's like, I find it a little bit ghoulish for the ones that are like trying to implicate Savannah and her family. Like, I know the brother-in-law and sister-in-law angle came immediately, so there had to be a little bit of fire there. But like when they're looking at the videos and analyzing it and how she's acting, they're the same people that analyze Erica Kirk and everything she has to say. So it's kind of like they're probably listening to everything the investigators, the FBI is telling them to do. Donald Trump gave her and obviously the local precinct carte blanche to use federal agents and things like that. So in the end, I mean, she's 84, 85 years old. Just hope that she comes back alive. You know, this, even if these guys end up in like Trinidad and Tobago, nobody knows who they are. They get away scot free. Getting Nancy Guthrie home is the priority. So I just wanted to uh, quickly continue to send our prayers out to them and hope that
Absolutely.
that is going to end up positive. And typically we're 10 days out. The longer this goes, the chances of that ending positive start to decline. But yeah, no, that's just it's tough. It's tough. And you know, transitioning from that's never easy, but I'm not going to be one of the people that like assume or anything. I just want her to come home. And yeah, Rylan caveat saying he was a philosophy theology major too. So I feel like you guys would have some interesting conversations here,
Hey,
especially since you
yeah.
wrote a book on Genesis. Um, Another thing I want to touch on real quick, that Super Bowl just happened this Sunday. I'm not going to talk much about uh, essentially the halftime show. I honestly don't care. I thought it was a pretty good presentation. Having humans as bushes was actually, I think, hilarious. Uh, I don't care that he spoke in Spanish. I know it's globalist stuff. We got to pick our battles here. The NFL, the NBA, these major leagues are not going to bend back. We have to force them to do it, and we're not going to. We're going to keep watching the NFL. So I know he probably said some naughty stuff in Spanish, but it was pretty tame in terms of probably what he could have said and could have done. So my big thing with Super Bowl is congrats to the Seahawks, Sam Darnold. I'm a Jets fan, Steven, so I'm a suffering Jets fan as always. But congrats to Sam Darnold and congrats to Jason Myers, who, if you look back, Marist there, he's a fellow alum. He was our kicker over at Marist and sets a Super Bowl record for most kicks of all time, and he's a champion. So kudos there. Did you watch the Super Bowl? Did you have any interest?
I didn't. I don't have any interest in it really at all. But you know what does strike me as really funny is people get mad about Spanish. What are the two greatest Western civilizations?
The two greatest Western civilizations.
Yes.
I mean, the Anglos are
Yes.
one of them, and probably your Spaniard Portuguese.
And the Spanish.
Yeah,
The
yeah,
two largest world empires in modern
mhm,
times were the English and the Spanish. And they split
yeah,
the New World.
yep,
And the language that's closest to English is Spanish.
yeah,
The
but
culture that's closest to English is Spain. My wife is from Spain.
yeah, yeah,
And this whole thing is just, it strikes me as hilarious. You know, we're not talking about, we're talking about some people, mostly who are not even of English descent.
yeah.
Okay. So just to get things straight, my family has all been here for like 200 years or more in America. And my wife is a first generation immigrant from Spain. And the people who are usually complaining about these things are people whose families probably showed up in the 20th century, which
Yeah,
is fine. I
yeah.
have no problem with that.
My family's did. You know,
But
my dad's side's from Ecuador, my mom's side's from Italy, and they weren't happy with it.
but why, why are these people suddenly the ones who get to say who is, authentically American and who authentically are not? We're the Spanish and Hispanic cultures. We're talking about Christian people who speak the closest language to English, whose
Mhm.
culture is the closest to English culture or Anglo culture. And we don't like that. Some people, that's weird.
So I think Nate hit more of it on the nose though with his comment. I think most people were displeased by the fact that Bad Bunny hates America more than just Spanish, and I think I have a semblance with that because we didn't care about Shakira, we didn't care about J Lo, we didn't care even when Ricky Martin popped on the screen.
That's
Every
fair.
single white person watching that was like, "Man, he looks great," right? Like we
Yeah.
didn't speak a lick of Spanish. We don't care. I think it was more for what Bad Bunny stands for, the things that he said. If he was just coming out there saying, "Hey, listen, I want to represent Puerto Rico, we're America as well. I want to just connect with the Americans and get away from the LGBTQ stuff, get away with away from the anti-ICE stuff," we would have all pretty much been like, modern rap, modern reggaeton. None of us listen to it, but whatever, right? But I think it was just the divisiveness that he brought to it. And then, you know, I find it kind of funny. Leaned into pissing off the conservative boomers, saying he was going to wear a dress, and he obviously didn't. I mean, I think again, the presentation of it was fine. I'm not a fan of like modern reggaeton. I
I
like
I hate reggaeton,
See,
all
I like your
forms.
classics. I like Don Omar. I like older Daddy Yankee, Nori, old Pitbull. Like I can listen. I like that. I enjoy that. But like modern rap, modern reggaeton, it's all rap. I'm not a fan of like more of the modern guys. I think they kind of suck. I like Bad Bunny
Mhm.
when he was in WWE. That was fine. I like wrestling. He was fine there. But I mean, it's a little bit much ado about nothing. Nate also saying they created a secondary halftime market. Congrats, TPUSA. Listen, TPUSA got eyes. They need to build next year and they need to get somebody relevant more. I like Kid Rock. I like country. So I liked all the guys, but most of America doesn't. You got to go get, what you call Tom McDonald. You got to go get some people that are a little more relevant to the time. Phil Labonte, obviously, all that remains. He's based as hell. He would go play metal, get a little bit of mix there, and I think that TPUSA could do something interesting as long as NFL keeps screwing up. But I don't honestly. Caveat I saying I always hate the halftime show. They all suck. I liked Bruno Mars. I liked Gaga's back in a few of them, but most modern ones have been bad. People are calling for Metallica. I'm not a Metallica guy. I don't know. Steven, what's your music interest?
I like jazz. I like bluegrass. I like new wave. Do you know
So
what that
none of
is?
this really like maybe if they got Fish up there, you'd be like, yeah, let's do it.
I really am not even sure who Fish is.
Oh, they're an awesome jam band. They're like a modern Grateful Dead. They're fantastic, actually. But all right, so I want to dive into the nitty gritty with
Sure.
you
Let's talk.
because we're talking a lot of like Christianity and stuff like that. You weren't always a Christian, and
That's true.
your background is you're a doctorate in theoretical physics,
Yes.
and typically a lot of modern day science is thought to be very secular, right? So was that where you were kind of in the camp of as you were going through science, and what brought you over to Christianity?
So it was actually an atheist quantum mechanics professor who convinced me that there is a God. So
Interesting.
back when I was in graduate school, you start out, you take courses, then there's a huge test on all of physics. If you pass that test, you go on to do your PhD work. So
Mhm.
in those first couple of years, you take a lot of classes. And so I
Yeah.
had this professor who, whenever he would finish one of his derivations, so it's basically like an hour and a half of just deep math and calculus to derive some quantum physics formula.
AKA calculus basically explain the world through numbers and letters. Like that's
Exactly,
where you get to at a certain level.
which is what physics is all about, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And he would shout, he would write QED, which basically means finished, and then he would shout, "Hail Odin!" And he told us that it was okay for him to say that because he worshiped the ancient Norse gods. Now, my PhD advisor was Norwegian, and even he didn't worship the ancient Norse gods. We all knew that professor was an atheist. He was just doing that to get on the nerves of Christians in the room, and
It was the flying spaghetti monster.
it was. And I at the time, I still think it's funny. I'm a born again Christian. I think it's funny.
If
But
you're a Christian without a funny bone, then Jesus would probably be like, go back and reread it, please. Like, honestly.
honestly, he gave his disciples nicknames,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Well, Peter means the rock, and John and James, those two disciples who were brothers, he called them the Thunder Brothers. And
Jesus is the most human individual, I think, in any literature. Like
absolutely,
he kind of signifies, and it's like, it's you can go by the theory of the Bible that it's written by man, so there could be flaws, but at the same time, there's certain things written that there was a divine hand that helped them write it, right?
absolutely.
There's certain things written in there that you can even talk to the most devout atheist, and then you point to some things and just the relevancy and everything going on and just how it's written, and it's like they can't argue it, right? They just
Yeah,
kind of pause, and it's like
yeah,
that's a good point. I'm gonna give you that one, but and it's like okay, fine, you gave me that point. We can continue, right? So
absolutely.
keep going, keep going.
So one day, we go into class and we're all sitting there. The lecture's about to start, and one of the students, who was a Christian, I've forgotten exactly what her name was, but I wouldn't share it on here anyway. She raises her hand, and the professor calls on her, and she says, "Could you tell us about fine tuning. And I'd never heard of this before in my life.
Yeah.
So the professor comes around, sits on his desk, and starts talking to the classroom. And he says, look, we have to be honest. The laws of physics absolutely look created because the math has a 1 out of infinity kind of mathematical specificity. Yeah. And that's not arbitrary random math.
It's not a mistake.
It's not a mistake. It is 1 out of infinity kind of specificity, target you have to hit in order to make everything even possible for life.
Yeah.
Then there's a long series of very unlikely events to form life and end up with us.
Yeah, we are very, very rare though. Like the possibility of Earth having the exact trajectory to create the exact ozone, and that honestly, we're such a blip. The fact that we've been able to have carbon-based life form for 6,000 years, whatever it's been, whatever they say.
We have no idea how rare we are. We just know we're really crazy rare. So he says, well, we don't really have to worry about this though, because there's something called the anthropic principle. And so the anthropic principle is, it says that because we can only exist in a universe where the laws of physics make it possible for us to exist, of course, you're always going to see a universe where the laws of physics make it possible for us to exist. So it's just kind of a way of sweeping the whole thing under the rug.
It's defining the definition by using the definition.
It's a circular
thing. Circular, yeah. It's a circular. But then again, as we know through a lot of seculars and people who kind of go into the more the Marxist communist realm, circular reasoning is their only reasoning, and it's where you find it. So it's the snake going after the tail. That's why a lot of collectivist symbols are circles, and typically one end biting the other, and that's where he got it at.
So I started thinking about this, and so I ran into him outside of class, and we were like walking by each other, and I said, "Hey, I've been thinking about what you said in class of the day." And I said, the anthropic principle really seems like a cop-out, because it seems like it's really the alternative between we exist or we don't exist. And he says, this is what I think. This is what he was saying. He says, I think that the idea of the universe is so compelling that it must exist, but we don't yet know why the universe exists. And he kind of just ran off, just kind of ran away. So I started thinking about that. If the idea of the universe is that compelling, doesn't that imply there's a mind in which the universe existed in to begin with? So that atheist quantum mechanics professor just gave me the most compelling philosophical argument for the existence of a creator I've ever heard from anybody ever.
Without intentionally. But the thing is too, I always find when you're dealing with a truly intelligent atheist, not a baseline atheist, an intelligent atheist, an intelligent agnostic, and you really dive in and you have a deep conversation about the potentiality of a God or religion, you can get them all to admit that there is definitely a more than zero chance that there's a God. And it's not that none of them come away with finite. No, there absolutely can't be. You get your kind of baseline dunderheads that are like, no, never. But you get the intelligent ones. They cannot definitively say, no, there is no such thing as a God. They all will admit, while I mock Christianity or Islam or Judaism, anything that has a, monotheistic deity, there isn't a 0% chance. And then you can get them into the fact that Christianity is the most scientifically provable. Now, I almost have a theory on that one of the main reasons it's the most scientifically provable is because Western society has modernized so much more than all the others. And so we're kind of seeking out our own stuff. And, that's kind of, and I'm a Christian. So, but as I look at it, it's a lot of Christians finding a lot of stuff about Christianity, right? We're seeking it, and we have the means, we have the money, we have the stuff. So where, a lot of your Islamic countries are looking for domination still. Jews are still a very small number, even though they're finding a lot of stuff as they're doing excavations over in, Jerusalem and things like that.
Well, they're finding crazy stuff over there.
Oh my God. I listened to Glenn
crazy stuff
out, and Glenn always has these people on where their whole job is to excavate parts of Jerusalem, and they are finding things, but they're finding things that also confirm Christianity, and they admit it.
Yeah,
too.
that's right. No, that's right. That's right.
It is wild. So I want to get to a few comments right here.
Sure.
Nate T saying Prince was spectacular. Prince was. Caveat Ty saying Mozart. Honestly, I want to go back to, let's get the marching band champion for college that year and let them play in the Super Bowl,
Yeah.
and they could do a set. I think it would be spectacular. We see the talent of these kids come through,
Yeah.
your future orchestra players and stuff like that at Philharmonics. Nate's saying that's blasphemous. I almost had to unsub for the Metallica slander. So here is my preface with that. The Metallica band, spectacular. The lead singer, I can only take him in dribs and drabs. I'm not.
But hold on. All Metallica music is much better in bluegrass.
Oh, that's
That's a
interesting.
fact.
That's interesting. Hey, one of my favorite groups is this band Apocalyptica, and they are hard rock classically trained cellists. And they started off as a Metallica cover band with the cellos. So again, I don't mind Metallica's music, but there's that. So, all right. So Caveat Ty saying get some opera at the Super Bowl. Peter the Rock Johnson. We got a few people coming in here. They must be Vikings fans with the skull. I like it. We're getting some people to roll in. What's going on, guys? Who is Alex? I'm Alex. Hey, the chat's bumping. I love it. All right. Let's keep rolling over here, Dr. Sweater. So you get your start of your conversion there, right?
Correct.
And now how deeply, because just because you start to get converted doesn't mean you dive in, right? So what makes you truly start to dive in?
So I started looking for the creator, right? So I've grown up in, I'm from Mississippi, which is the buckle in the Bible Belt. So I grew up with probably more knowledge of the Bible than most people who were in their first year of, studying to become a pastor.
Yep.
It's just something that just soaks in. And I already knew most of Christianity. So I started, studying Islam. I actually was reading the Quran and living in a Muslim enclave when 9/11 happened. I was already a Christian, but, I was still studying a lot of things.
Yeah.
I tried studying Hinduism, had a lot of Hindu friends, and they all told me not to bother with Hinduism. And
Hindu's a brutal religion. Because
they said you're not going to like what you find.
No.
And then they said, we don't even believe in it.
Well, India's had a really, really big transition because basically all your leaders in India were the top of the caste system. And I mean, they were holding down so many because they believed in the full caste system.
Yeah.
The reason why Modi has become, even though Modi has his problems, he has westernized so much of India in the terms of, I think they made the announcement a few years ago, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, that while Hindu is still the national religion, they've done away with the caste system theory. And it's pissed off a lot of their powerful when they did that. And I want to say hello to everybody in the chat. We appreciate you guys.
Well, the caste system, caste discrimination is illegal. And that was built into their constitution. Gandhi actually did that, my understanding.
But they didn't care for the longest time.
Yeah. They actually are trying to bring the caste system back more.
Really?
Yeah, they are now. Modi is what's known as a Hindu nationalist.
Okay.
And his party is a Hindu nationalist party. And they want to bring back more traditional Hinduism because their moves away from all of that are basically Christianizing the religion. And what we're seeing all over the world is a reaction against the Christianization of Hinduism, Islam, even communism, right? We're trying to Christianize Chinese communism.
Which we should.
The values of Jesus Christ are obviously the best. Obviously, objectively the best. And so any other cultural group that comes up with a different set of values and measures them up will always come up short.
Yeah.
And so they all have to try and Christianize their religions. And at a certain point, they realize that their children are just going to become Christian. And then they don't want that. And so they have to oppress Christianity in some form or another. China's doing that now after Christianity grew so much. The Japanese under the Tokugawa shogunate a few hundred years ago actually killed every single Christian in the country.
Yep.
Because they were rapidly converting to Christianity.
Mm-hmm.
And they saw that as a threat to Japanese power. The power dynamic of the shogunate at the time. And you see this pattern all over the place, right? It's not unique to those places. And so I think anytime you really objectively look, what are you going to come up with? Christian countries in the world are the absolute best places to live.
Easily.
By any metric, wealth, human rights, creativity, you name it. Now, that doesn't mean that all Christian countries are, the greatest places on earth. There are some kind of emerging Christian nations. There are some older Christian nations that are kind of isolated in places that have historically not done very well. Ethiopia is an example. Georgia, I believe Georgia's Christian. Over, that's one of the little Russian
former Soviet satellite.
Yeah. But it's surrounded really not by strong Christian countries. No. Those tend to not do very well.
And the Armenians are consistently getting genocided, and they're one of the strongest Christian countries in the world.
Absolutely. And so this stuff is happening, right? Yeah. And it's been happening for 2,000 years. And the forces that don't want to be Christian are the ones that are causing all the trouble in the world. Or it's people in Western societies who don't want to live by Christian values. You're thinking, Marx, you're thinking Hitler, you're thinking, all these other Western dictators. They're not living by Western values, even though they are Westerners. So I think what we're going to see over the rest of this century is literally a coming to Jesus moment.
I think we're starting to see it.
These cultures have to realize, and they're not stupid, they have to realize that their cultures are behind for a reason. And the reason is not historical randomness. It is their values.
Now, how do we combat the aggression of Islam? Because Islam's an aggressive, massively growing, and Christianity hasn't stopped growing. People like to pretend like they talk about how Islam is the fastest growing religion, and historically it has been. It's been growing very exponential. But it's not like Christianity has stopped growing. Christianity has been spreading as well.
So people are not converting to Islam. Muslims are having babies, lots of babies.
Yeah,
that's the only reason that they're growing. Okay. And they're living in, so put yourself in the shoes of Utah. There's basically no arable land. You have large families. You run out of land. What do? You start leaving.
Yep.
That's exactly why there are Muslims who've been moving to America and moving to Europe, is they've overpopulated their nations because they don't have a lot of arable land. We have stopped that. Europe even more so than the US. And those populations will continue to grow. I live in Texas.
Yep.
People in Texas could conquer every single Islamic country on our own and have very few lost lives on the American side. That we're talking about nations that have large populations and deep poverty.
Mm-hmm.
They are not strong. We don't need to fear that our nations are going to be invaded and conquered by Islam. Now, that has happened historically. Turkey was a Christian nation. I don't know how much of my videos you've watched, but Spain, of course,
I've seen some of them. Yeah.
So Spain was was invaded and conquered by Islamic forces in 711, and they fought back for 800 years, and they finally won in 1492. And then that's when they sent out Columbus.
Anything to do to proximity as well, though, because the proximity to those Middle Eastern nations, Europe's right next to them, right? They're neighbors.
They're neighbors.
The only buffer-ish is basically Pakistan kind of extends a little, but still, it's not enough of a buffer. Middle East touches your Eastern European countries. So the proximity is much easier. Where we're here, they have to travel and we have to let them in. And we have done a whole lot of that. We have done, and Texas is fighting back against, I know they wanted to build the all town that is a all Muslim town,
Sharia law town
and things like that, where essentially it's like, oh, we're not going to say people can't live here, but it wouldn't be great. And I mean, Tyler Oliveira just did the video about the Jew town, the town of Jews in upstate New York over here where I am. Yeah. And the guy basically said, he's like, anybody could live here. You're just not going to have a good time. But it was a different type of way, right? It was because you're
Yeah.
not going to share our values. It wasn't a
Yeah.
threat. It wasn't, we're going to do anything to you as Jews. It's, you're not going to be comfortable here. We are
Yeah.
Hasidic Jews. We believe in, very little luxury. We are, we're studious. And like, it was just, you're not going to enjoy your life here. Where I think it's a little different with the Islam community, where they're like, if you don't convert, you're going to have a lot of problems, like, period.
So do you know what the word Islam means?
I did, but refresh my memory because I'm going to get it wrong.
Sub- it means submission.
And I'm not surprised because that's what Muhammad called for in the Quran. Uh,
Yes.
and he's, the prophet, it's interesting. The Quran is a interesting book in a lot of ways because I think it's bastardized in many ways with the way it's read, where they are only going by Sharia and not a whole lot of the other teachings that Muhammad had in the Quran. But it's like anything else. If you decide to take only certain parts of something, you can make it whatever the hell you want to make it.
So here's the fundamental issue with Islam. Islam teaches that God's message from the beginning has always been the same. Christians believe the same, but we disagree on what the message is. The Bible says that God's message to us from the beginning was that we should love one another.
Mm-hmm.
Muslims believe that God's message from the beginning was a set of rules to be followed.
Yeah.
And that if you follow those rules, you will be blessed by God and profit. If those rules are from God, why are all the worst places in the world to live in the most Islamic?
And
they know this. Their leaders know this.
The only slight pushback, though, is the Persian nations, which did practice a lot of Islamic stuff. They weren't so dialed into the Sharia side of it. They were dialed into much more of the whole reading of the Quran. And they were rather modern. They had women.
You're talking about Iran? You're talking about Iran primarily?
Iran and
more
kind of like
Iran before
the
now.
modern Iran, the Persian Empire, the branching into the Ottomans, which got a little more heavy into more of the heavy-handed side, but still had a lot more full theory there.
The Persian Empire, when it was powerful, was actually Zoroastrian, which is a monotheistic religion, or at least it became a monotheistic religion. Some people claim it's the oldest monotheistic religion, but most likely it was a pantheistic religion that became monotheistic after interacting with Christianity, Judaism, and later Islam.
Gotcha.
But almost all of the advances that are credited to Islam were actually made by Jews and Christians living under Islamic rule.
Interesting.
Primarily from former Greek-speaking countries. It is not and I've had lots of Muslim friends. I'm not on here to say that Muslims are bad people.
No, I'm friends with
some are, but some Christians are too.
Yeah.
What I'm talking about is that the system itself, the system in the Quran, is not a system that teaches love for your neighbor. It doesn't teach turn the other cheek. What it teaches is submission, and it teaches that it's better to force someone to submit to your system of rules than to have them convert because they believe that it's the best.
I also think, too, a main difference is choice and forgiveness is preached.
Yes.
And we are, it's very open that after Adam and Eve, God said, you're going to now have the sin of knowing you're unclean, right? Adam and Eve didn't know they were naked. They did not know that they should hide their privates until they ate the forbidden fruit. And then they realized that they were dirty. They were unclean. They should hide that. And that's when God noticed that they had done that. They had ate the forbidden fruit. God knew immediately when he saw Adam and Eve have their privates covered. And then because of the sin, he gave us choice. He allowed us to sin. That wasn't a part of the grand design. The grand design was human beings are my extension. They're perfect. They will live with us forever. Adam and Eve will procreate and we'll have another perfect symbol of me. And we screwed that up. Adam and Eve screwed that up, and choice, but also God consistently. And, Old Testament God is a pretty hard ass person, but also forgave. I don't know how many times he forgave the Jews. They're stiff-necked people according to God.
You know who, though, is the only person in the Bible who brings up eternal hellfire and damnation?
Who?
Jesus.
Oh, yeah.
So people love to talk about how the Old Testament God is all, hellfire and brimstone, but it's actually Jesus who tells us we're going to go to hell if we don't follow him. He tells this graphic story in Luke chapter 16 of a rich man and a poor man who die and they go to the afterlife.
Yes. Yep.
And the poor man is doing fine. And the rich man, who was callous, it wasn't so much because of his wealth, but because he was callous, didn't care about the poor man. He is literally burning on fire. And he begs that the poor man who died go and dip his finger in some water and just put one drop of it on his tongue, because he's in such suffering. Even just that one drop will help him. And he's told no, that there's a gap in the afterlife, and the good people can't go to those. So then in this parable, Jesus is telling the rich man who's burning in hell begs Lazarus, who is the man who has died, the poor man,
Yep.
to go back to that they let him rise from the dead so that he can go back and tell the rich man's family that hell is real. And this is the last line that Jesus says is, if they didn't follow God, I'm paraphrasing, because of the teachings of the Old Testament, they're not going to follow even if they see someone rise from the dead with their own eyes.
It's very true. Yeah.
Right and wrong are obvious when you read them, right?
And it's so funny it took the human side of God in order to try and really portray that, right? Because like you said,
Yeah.
there is the understanding of the Old Testament of, God's kind of a hard ass, right? He picks the Jews and the Hittites, the Jebusites, screw all them, right? Like it's the Jews he focuses on. It's the people, it's the descendants of Abraham and all that. But it's true that, and I tell everyone too, people are like, well, should you read the Bible literally? And it's like parables are meant to be forever stories to help us guide our life. And the most amazing part about the Bible to me has always been that you can find a story from Jesus that is relevant to any issue you are having today, typically. And
Absolutely.
it was so either the disciples were easily the most intelligent humans ever to walk the face of the earth, which we know they weren't. When you read about them, they were very average people generally, if not some below average, right? Like
Yeah.
they weren't like we think of the founding fathers. The founding fathers were extraordinary humans. They were beyond the pale, the best, possibly, the best combination of individuals that United States had that possibly assembled ever. The disciples were very average people. Jesus picked them that way intentionally. And in order for them to, after being with Jesus for the short period of time they were with him, all of a sudden they can write the words of Jesus exactly from memory consistently, and it could still be relevant today. It's almost a non-believable thing with the way it was told, right? There has to be something that was guiding their hand. Like it's not possible that there
Absolutely.
isn't. It really it's insane to think of.
The most amazing thing to me about the Bible is it is deeply critical of the culture that wrote it. When you read ancient Egyptian literature or Mesopotamian literature or Greek literature, Roman literature, you don't find that. It's all
No.
patting themselves on the back and justifying how they're better than everybody else.
Anyone that did got killed.
That's it.
Your philosophers that wrote against them were murdered usually.
Yeah. But that is so much not what the Bible is about. The Bible is
No.
essentially about God's chosen people turning away from him sending messengers to tell them how terrible they are, and then them mostly dealing with the outcome, destructions, multiple Holocausts, by the way. There have been
Yes.
multiple Holocausts.
Mhm.
The before the 20th century, 2,000 years earlier, about half of the Jewish population was killed in 70 AD by the Romans.
Yep.
They killed 1 to 2 million people. We don't even know how many. And they were all driven out to the edge of the Roman Empire, which is how they ended up coming into Spain with the Muslims, is that
Mhm.
they were kind of riding the Muslim wave because they had been driven out of the Roman Empire and weren't really present in Western countries.
And
It's crazy, the history.
some of the
Go ahead.
funnest parts about the New Testament were kind of the missives between the disciples as they were far away too, and kind of in real time, you're watching in the Bible the disciples of Jesus Christ almost debating the word, talking about things that are happening. And it's, I'm a historian. I was a history major at Marist. So for me too, when I'm, reading through the Bible or reading through any historical text, I'm also pulling from it because they're historical documents as well.
They are.
But the Bible is one of the most historical because you can trace back the individuals that they speak about, especially the ones in power, are the ones that they match the almost exact moments in time in history, which is
Yes.
what makes them so unique. They're just not the stories they talk about, the parables, the people they speak of aren't made up people. And I
Correct.
think that is what's the bizarre part about it. Most other of your religious texts are giving you examples or are following one individual that is going and doing things where the stories in the New and the Old Testament, you could trace back so much, especially the New Testament. The New Testament is your modernity, right? Like there's a
Right.
reason why we start it at we start our time at zero, at Jesus's birth. Like it is incredible. So caveat eyes. My novel, Zayed, I might say it wrong. You can yell at me. Is about the European forced into slavery. It's based on an unfinished opera. That's awesome. That's true. Slavery in the Ottoman Empire. There we go. So there's so much to it. And like and that's the thing. When you if you surface level the Bible and you don't have I'm not a theologian by any stretch of the word. I've read the Bible, but I have not studied it, right? And there's so many great theologians that are, one of my friends at Marist, I swear the guy could have cured cancer. Such a genius, was a biomed major, and then was like, I'm going to go become a Dominican friar. And I'm like, that's awesome too.
Oh, that's
And
awesome.
he's such a great theologian. And he's still the same sassy, sarcastic dude I knew, but he's just a fantastic priest at this point. But that's what it's always been, right? Some of your most
Yeah.
intelligent people decide to devote their lives to studying the Bible. And God, there's a reason why
Yeah.
people just want to dive into it.
It's so many. I mean, you look at C.S. Lewis, right? I mean, he was an
Mhm.
atheist, and
Until Tolkien got into
until
him.
Tolkien converted him, right?
Yeah, Tolkien. And there was a lot of people because that's a weird time
Yeah.
too. Some of your greatest
Yeah.
minds would get together.
Yeah.
And and there was always Tolkien telling C.S.
Yeah.
Lewis when, and
Yeah.
it was and people don't realize the Lord of the Rings and the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe was a battle of who can write the better version of the Bible in a fantasy.
Mhm.
It's so cool. And I think C.S. Lewis wrote something that Tolkien absolutely blew him away. He admitted defeat.
Well, what am I talking about history and the reality of the biblical narrative? My favorite kind of anchor point is the alphabet. Do you know about this?
No.
So the alphabet was developed by Canaanite peoples living in Egypt before the Exodus. They took hieroglyphs, and I'm telling you, this is not conspiracy. This is standard, archaeology. They took Egyptian hieroglyphs and they repurposed them to represent a language ancestral to biblical Hebrew. That
Interesting.
alphabet comes up from Egypt into Canaan. It's then becomes the standard way of writing after the Exodus, not before, but after. It then spreads up. It becomes Phoenician and Proto-Hebrew. The oldest parts of the Bible were almost certainly written in an alphabet very similar to that first alphabet.
Wow.
It then gets introduced by the Phoenicians over to the Greeks, who changed the alphabet to write their language. It then moves over to the Romans. The Romans then introduce it to England in 43 AD. What's fascinating about this is that the word alphabet comes from the name of the first two characters, Aleph and Bet, or
That's so cool.
Alpha, Beta in the Greek
Yeah.
alphabet.
Yeah.
Aleph and Bet in the Hebrew alphabet.
And that's why it's first and second, right? That's why
Like
you're
first and
alpha and
second.
you're beta. That's so cool. Again, my history brain just melted with that. That's so fun.
If you go and look up what the characters look like, R looks like this because the original picture that represented R was a head turned in profile. I think it was turned this way. And over 4,000 years, it got standardized into a head shape.
And it's like it's interesting too because it's like you don't really think about why did civilization go away from characters, which was your Sumerian, which is what the Mesopotamians used, which is what your Egyptians used, which was an effective way of communicating, right?
Yeah.
And also, even in your Asian nations, right? Like they're characters, and each line has a specific sound that delves into a word. And that's why sometimes it's really hard for us when we know the Romance languages and things like that, which have our modern alphabet, to look at Japanese, Korean, and
Yeah.
Chinese and understand that just a minor difference in the
Yeah.
the shape changes the whole word, which is why they are
Oh yeah.
huge in calligraphy from
Yeah.
a
Oh
young
yeah.
age.
Oh yeah.
We're big in penmanship because, and it's like that's awesome that you kind of explained that how we moved away from characters and picture driven into
Sound driven.
phonetically sound
Phonetically sound
letters.
driven.
That's so
That's
cool.
it. And
That's
what's really cool about a phonetic alphabet is you can write the same language in multiple alphabets.
Mhm.
So we have two versions of the Torah in Hebrew. We have one in modern Hebrew, which is the Jewish Torah, but we have another one in Sumerian Hebrew, same
Wow.
languages, just written differently with different characters. And the Sumerian alphabet is much closer to the alphabet that was used in those first few centuries of Jewish history in the First Temple period, which
There has to be
modern
some
Hebrew was not used then.
There also has to be some different meanings though, right? Because even when you're translating there, some things have there
Always
different
lost in translation. Yeah.
emphasis on certain things, and especially when you're using
Yeah.
phrasing and things like that.
Yeah.
Like
So
there's certain things that you're not going to get there. And
yeah,
and
absolutely.
I always wondered why they always said like when you're romanticizing some words. That makes sense because the Romans kind of brought it into our official modern parlance, not with your Greek alphabet, which is
Right.
pretty different than what we have.
Right.
But from your Romans on, it's been kind of your standard A to Z. And that's really cool.
Yeah.
That's fun. This is already a fun show. We can end it now and it will be fun as hell. Just learning that. Like that's awesome. So obviously you're still a scientist and a student of history, and one of the things that I think when you're diving into things like me being a historian, you being a scientist, like we all share an enjoyment of research, right? You learn how to research, you learn to enjoy it. Things that are boring to everyone else, we get, obviously I just learned about the alphabet and I got giddy. So how have you jived with having the scientific brain, but also the religious brain? Have you found that it's made it more fruitful for you in discovering more scientific things when you're believing that there was a guiding hand, there is a reason, as opposed to, well, it exists because it does?
I think no, because science is not about searching for why in the ultimate why does the universe exist. That's Christian and atheist scientists agree that that's not a question that science can answer.
Yeah.
Science is really just about how things happen. There's a why in the sense of, I drop this thing, it falls, why? But
Mhm.
that kind of a why in science is really a how.
Yeah.
And it's really in physics, of course, gravity is a mathematical statement.
Which
And
I am a big believer that gravity is fake. I hate gravity. I hate it. Certain things happen that shouldn't, and I'm just like, this proves gravity's not real. That thing shouldn't have fell. But no, I digress.
So I don't think that there's really anything positive or negative about being Christian or Jewish or Muslim
Yeah.
and being involved in science. What I think is different about Christian cultures is that we have a thirst to know, but also a thirst to improve the world.
Yeah.
And that's not something that's present in every culture historically. Buddhists are really nice people, but their fundamental teaching is that you need to basically free yourself of all your desires and passions so that you stop reincarnating and I guess cease to be a
And it's all
distinct being or
internalized,
something.
and that's all
Yes.
internal. There's nothing
Yes.
external about it. There is
Yes.
no It's not doing good for the sake of others, it's doing good for the sake of your
Yes.
eventual rise to nirvana.
Yes. And they're not mean people,
No, they're good people.
but they have not their focus is spending hours a day sitting around and doing nothing. And if you look at the history of the Middle Ages, it was monks spending hours a day praying and then hours a day figuring out how to make the lives of the nearby peasants better.
Yeah. Yeah.
Most of those monasteries were actually some form of factory.
Like I said in the beginning, I always like to remind people, your most learned people in especially your Western Judeo-Christian societies were your theologians. They were your most learned. They were your
Yep.
doctors. They
Yep.
were your teachers. They were your scientists, which is why
Yep.
you look at all of, not all, but a good majority of your great historical philosophers. They were either religious in their time or Christian or Jew. Or
Yep.
they had religion backing them. There are very
Yep.
few great philosophers that were just full on atheists. Even ones that were parading as Christians, they still had that basis beyond in their philosophy. So, because typically, like I said, your learned people were your theologians first, and then they went to everywhere else as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, I find it interesting, that you've gone on this quest now. It seems like you're having a lot of fun diving into Christianity. You've obviously wrote the book about Genesis. Now, Genesis has been, I think, one of the most focused on stories in the history of anything, if not the most focused on. What did you write about there, and what did you bring that maybe someone else has not brought into that conversation?
I think what I'm bringing in is an understanding of how the first Israelites would have understood those stories.
How
And so
so?
I've spent, you can see some of the books behind me. I've spent many, many years reading through Sumerian literature.
Tell me those aren't for show.
No, 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 they're real. This is actually a cool one. Do you know? I don't know if this is probably gonna be flipped, but do you know about the Amarna letters?
No, I do not.
So let's go back to King Tut's father. So King Tut's father was kind of a nut, and he tried to introduce a form of what's sometimes called monotheism into Egypt. We're not exactly sure if it was really monotheistic or not, but one of the crazy things he did was he went out and he built a new capital called Amarna out in the desert.
Interesting.
When he was not popular. And so he built it out there to get away from everybody because they didn't like him. Okay. His name was Akhenaten. And King Tut's original name was not Tutankhamun. It was Tutankhaten, which I believe means the beloved of Aten, which was a god that his father tried to introduce. So anyway, long story short, this was abandoned after Akhenaten died. And his entire city, basically, his capital city, basically got covered by sand because it was not in a nice place where people lived. It was out past where the Nile flooded. So come along a couple hundred years ago, these are discovered. You notice that right there. That is cuneiform writing.
Yeah.
On a clay tablet in Egypt. Turns out these are the royal correspondence between the king of Babylon and the Pharaoh and
Wow.
King Tut's father and grandfather, and also to various kings, vassal states in Canaan.
That's incredible.
So you can read their personal writings, and they are magical. I will tell you that some of these are quoted in my book. This is one of the most magical pieces of historical literature you can possibly read. It is, by magical, I mean enchanting and captivating. I don't mean, magical spells. People are murdered, and the king of Babylon complains to the Pharaoh that a bunch of thugs in Canaan captured his men. We have lists of shipments that the Pharaoh sent to the king of Babylon as wedding gifts. And it's just deeply personal. So
that's incredible.
This was right before Moses would have been born. So we know that there was Mesopotamian knowledge in the royal court because somebody had to read and write. They weren't reading and writing in Egyptian. They were reading and writing in Sumerian. Actually, it was Akkadian. It wasn't Sumerian.
That's incredible.
It was the Akkadian cuneiform, which is one of the two main languages spoken in ancient Mesopotamia. And so when we see things like the story of Noah, and you look at the Akkadian version, which is older than Moses, and you see very, very obvious similarities, you go, okay, that's in the Bible because that's what people thought. But then you start analyzing it a level or two deeper and you go, wait a second, these are not identical stories. Why are they not identical stories? What is the difference in the biblical story and why? And so there's a fascinating thing. There are two stories of apocalyptic destruction of the human race. There is the originally Sumerian story of the Great Flood. Okay, that's version in a substantial way is in the Bible.
Yeah.
And there's another version or another story like that, which is Egyptian, which the oldest copy we have is actually from the tomb of King Tut. And it's called the Book of the Heavenly Cow. And in it, Ra sends, not Horus, the name will come to me in a moment. It's Hathor to destroy humanity because humanity has decided that they're going to rise up and overthrow the rule of Ra. So Hathor starts killing people, and then Ra, who's the sun god, relents. And he makes this fake blood to get Hathor drunk. She passes out, and they save 90% of humanity. But what happens after that? Ra cannot forgive humanity. And so he goes up into the sky, away from man, to forever be unreachable.
So he becomes God.
Well, he was already God, but he becomes an unreachable God.
Yeah.
Right? If you look at the Mesopotamian version, especially the first Akkadian version of the Noah's flood story, the gods, the pagan gods, send multiple times. They send plagues and ultimately the flood to try and wipe out humanity because people are making too much noise and the gods are having trouble sleeping. So you look at this and what are the differences? So on the front end, God would never do something like that. The real God, if he's going to destroy mankind, he's going to do it because of righteousness and wickedness.
Yep.
Okay. First thing, that's a story not about Noah. It's a story about the nature of the real God. Secondly, on the back end, he still loves us.
He made the covenant.
He still forgives us. And he wants to have a personal relationship with us. What is all of that called? That's called the gospel.
And he never leaves us.
And he never leaves us. We have all earned destruction. But if we just turn away and follow God, he will be our personal God and we will be saved. That is the gospel. And you look at every single bit of these stories in the beginning, and it's the same thing over and over again. It's the gospel message over and over again. But you don't really understand that until you see where the stories come from or how they relate to similar stories that the ancient Egyptians would have known intimately. And so a lot of these things we had totally forgotten about for thousands of years because, so Abraham is from the Sumerian city of Ur, which was the capital until about the year 2000 BC. It was wiped out by the Elamites. It never recovered again. That was effectively the end of Sumerian civilization. Lots of the Sumerians probably left afterwards. And Haran was a Sumerian settlement way up in what's now modern day Turkey. It was one of the two major centers of worship for the moon god, the other being Ur itself. So when Abraham's family goes to Haran, well, because there were other Sumerians there, right? And so that's perfectly normal.
Yeah.
Perfectly historical and everything.
It makes sense.
By the time of the Greeks, when the Jewish scholars are rewriting the Old Testament into Greek, the Septuagint, they don't write Ur, Kasdim, which is what's actually in the Bible. They wrote Ur of the Chaldees. The Chaldean Empire was the Neo-Babylonian Empire, which hadn't existed for a while. But they put that in because otherwise no one knew what Ur was. Ur had been forgotten for so long that the only people who remembered were these Jewish scholars who knew it was somewhere in Babylon or in Mesopotamia.
That's incredible. And
It's
it's
incredible.
funny, it's amazing too, just like there's still so much more history to be discovered, right?
Yes.
Like there's so much that we have yet to learn. And the thing is too, it's like the more we find, the more it confirms the Bible, which I think is like
It
so
does.
crazy. Like you would think we'd be able to find more and more things that are in denial of the Bible of, okay, they embellish this, or okay, this is a little, but it's like, no, no. Even the Old Testament is getting proved over and over and
Over and
over.
over again.
Not just the time of Jesus, the time of man, where he was on our modern times, the Old Testament. It's like, I mean, it's wild. So caveatizes the question. What's up with the difference between the stories of the mainstream media and the new media? Are you talking about our media, like what we currently have, like what we're doing here? I don't know exactly where you're going with that caveat. Some twist it to their own purpose. I think everyone twists their stories to their own
Yeah,
purposes.
that's true.
Um, that's human nature. But yeah, no, it's so crazy. So I want to get into our country, the United States. People get confused, I think, with the fact that while we don't have a stated state religion because we didn't want to be like the king and have the Protestant religion forced on people, it doesn't mean that we are a fully secular nation. We were Our laws are based on the Ten Commandments. Western civilization has Judeo-Christian values. That's why we don't kill each other. That's why we look down upon adultery. That's why we, don't like all the things, that we look down upon are based on our Western Judeo-Christian values. What we have seen more and more of, though, is as we're bringing in more non-Christians, those values in certain areas are getting chipped away. They're not regarding our laws as their laws because they have different laws that they live by. So you being someone who has deeply studied Christianity and obviously pays attention, should we go back to kind of truly not enforcing but embracing our Christian values, or should we still lean into the secularism that has kind of defined us over the past, I want to say maybe only 30, 40 years, because it hasn't been that long
It
since we
hasn't been
truly
that long.
abandoned Christian morality.
In 1980, both presidential candidates were evangelical Christians.
Yeah.
In 1980, Mississippi was a swing state.
Yes, it was.
Not because it wasn't conservative. It's because both parties at the time were conservative Christian parties. It has shifted radically starting in the 90s, really, is when it started to really move in a big way. Now, you could trace back some of that earlier, but it didn't really start to move away until then in a big way. The remarkable thing about this is it's the blue areas that have rejected Christian values and embraced, secularism the most. Those are also the places with the lowest standard of living. They're the places with the lowest birth rates. They are the places where people are moving out of the most. I don't think we have to worry about it because Americans aren't stupid. They look at this, that young people, oh my God, young people. I have a 13-year-old daughter. All the young people know that,
There's something
career
wrong.
over
They feel
family.
it.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
know.
They feel it.
They know all that stuff is just wrong.
Now, is there something to be said though about the fact that we've let all of our major institutions go onto their sides generally? Like we've allowed them over, since starting in the 60s with Paulo Freire and coming over and turning our schools of education into basically leftist hotbeds and really preaching that secularism, that collectivism, which we are seeing prevalent among school teachers and Hollywood, once being a more traditional conservative value place, now is a bastion of leftist thought. Deep into our government, most of our federal executive branch is very heavily leftist. So what can we do there? Are you seeing enough in these kids that they're going to eventually get into these institutions and start, maybe not to fully switch them back, but at least balance it out? Where are we going to go with that?
Most of those institutions are just going to die.
Hopefully.
Hollywood is almost dead now.
Yeah.
The number of movies they make is very small, and what they do make is not popular. And whenever they try and make the movie about their ideals, it flops. You go broke, you go woke, you go broke. And that is very obvious. Disney is seeing it over and over again. They're making very expensive films, Marvel comic films, other kinds of films. And whenever it's woke, it just bombs.
And then at that point, when it's not woke, they really don't get the benefit of the doubt. And what the numbers could be, they get a decent jump after week 2 when word of mouth, but they missed that initial boom because
Mhm.
everyone's so fearful. I think the
Yeah.
last one that did well because people thought it was going to do well was Guardians of the Galaxy 3.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
people really like the story. They like Chris Pratt, and
Yeah.
that did well, but everything else, and they're trying to get Doomsday. Like, they're really trying to lean into the, hey guys, we're back. We're not doing that crap anymore. Men are back in the forefront. Come back to us.
And maybe they will be able to survive. We'll see. But you look, and where are people spending their time right now? When I was a kid being I'm 52 now, meaning, until about 15 years ago,
Yeah.
at this time of night, I was on the TV. Where are all of your guests right now? They're not on TV.
Hanging out on YouTube, on
They're
social
hanging out on
media.
YouTube, on social media, because that's where
Yep.
the interesting stuff is. It's,
Mhm.
I watch a fair amount of TV, and most of what I watch is stuff from 20 years ago because they don't make that much good TV anymore.
I watch anime. I'm a big anime fan. And I still like, that's honestly like, I like anime because the Japanese just don't care. They,
Yeah,
they,
that's
they
true.
really
Yeah.
don't. They're like, oh, you care about this stereotype? Don't watch it. Like, we're going to lean into that. We don't care. But again, like, I used to be someone that would watch more movies and things like that. And it's funny too, like, not this weekend because people are busy, but next weekend, my wife and I plan on going out to see an Angel Studios movie, Solo Mio with Kevin James. I like Kevin James. Looks like a cute little chick flick, but there's even that like inkling. I've never been a prude. I've never been a person that's like, I honestly don't care about somebody's thoughts or their politics as long as they're entertaining and good at their job, right? I could think you're a moron, but also think you're really good at what you do. There's plenty of people in Hollywood that are like that, right? But I find myself going, if I see something that Angel Studios is putting out, I feel more likely I want to go watch that, right? Like, just because I don't want to give Hollywood, now their rendition of Animal Farm is going to be socialist, communist slop,
They're
and I have
doing.
no idea.
I didn't know they were redoing Animal Farm.
So
Wait, which Animal Farm? Animal Farm the book, or are we talking about Animal House the movie?
No, Animal Farm the book, the Orwell book.
Oh yeah, I heard they're doing. Yeah, I have heard about that. It's scary.
I really think that Angel Studios bought the rights to a completed thing and didn't read it. I really, because Angel Studios' track record has been fantastic. Like, King of Kings was great. I didn't see David, but I heard David was amazing. They've done really good things at Angel Studios, and it's all been very much family-based, more Christian. They're making this like a anti-capitalism, socialism, communist is actually not that bad. It was capitalism bad in the end type of thing. And don't get me wrong, Orwell's no like friend to capitalism, but he hated Stalinist Marxism. Like, he was a communist himself. He just didn't like that communism.
So I've had multiple friends who grew up in communist countries, including, real red China.
Yeah.
One scientist friend of mine grew up in Novosibirsk in Siberia. Do you know about that city?
No, I don't know. I just know Siberia is a hellhole.
So during the Soviet era, the Soviets were very afraid that their scientists were going to defect. So they moved them all to a city in the middle of Siberia called New Siberia, Novosibirsk. And my buddy, that's where he grew up. He
Was that
grew
like
up
a
to be a
step away from
scientist.
the gulags, just in case they ever got
It's
bad? They would just send
no,
them
no.
right there.
It's a nice place. It's a nice place.
Okay.
But
That's
it's forever from anywhere, right?
Yeah.
And so his parents were scientists, and that's where he grew up. And they didn't like communism. They had the best in Novosibirsk, but so many people. One of my good friends many years ago grew up in Romania, and she said she remembered the day that freedom came, that communism fell, because that was the day that they got to taste Coca-Cola for the first time.
That's insane. And it's something we take for granted, right?
Before that, they only had Pepsi.
Ooh, I mean, go flat the moment the cap opens. Listen, I don't understand. I know people like Pepsi, and the first few sips of Pepsi are fine. It's a decent tasting thing. But if you don't drink it within 5 minutes, it's flat. Like, I can't do that.
Yeah.
I hate that. If I'm gonna drink motor oil, my motor oil better be tasty the whole time. Okay, that's. But you see this all the time too, and the best example is East Germany and West Germany, right?
It is.
Like East Germany and West Germany are the perfect example of what a capitalist society versus a communist society becomes. And now Germany obviously didn't learn a damn thing because they are heading back to being fully East Germany as a country. Or
That's
Europe.
all of North Europe. It's not so much true in Southern Europe, but it's true in Northern Europe for sure.
Well, I mean,
Italy's doing real well actually right now. Italy's doing real well.
Giorgia Meloni's fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, their economy is doing well. They're high, lots of Christians.
Yeah.
Spain used to be doing well, but they've got a socialist government now. They're doing some weird things. We'll see. I love Spain.
Portugal went to the right though. There. Portugal went to the right, and but their issue is that Spain's right above them, and they kind of are very reliant on Spanish things in Portugal, unfortunately. Italy's interesting because Giorgia Meloni scared me for a little because there were times where she looked like she was playing the globalist game, but I think she has some of that Trumpian in her where she's going to play nice with the EU. She has to. They are, they're creditors, right? Like
right.
Her brethren got her in there and she has to play nice with them. But she's also going to do what she wants for Italians. Italians are Italians. That's it. And obviously Japan just became the most base country on the planet. Curious if they're going to become imperial again. They do have that tendency, but they just went fully to the right, which is awesome for them. So caveat I saying capitalism is a terrible system until you compare it with any other system. And I mean, listen, it's part of that's true, right? Because a full free market is a dangerous thing, right? When you give freedom to anything, you obviously do need some regulation, but
absolutely.
But it also depends on who's regulating it, right?
So the real difference, though, is not capitalism versus unregulated capitalism. It is capitalism versus socialism. Socialism is the use of very high taxes to basically punish people who have been very successful financially and to redistribute that wealth. It's a half step to communism where everything is owned by the government.
Which Marx always said socialism will lead to communism.
Absolutely.
And Saul Alinsky repeated it, and all the Frankfurt people repeated it. They know this.
And a lot of people get confused and they think socialism means social programs, but that's not true at all. The US actually spends as much per capita on public health care as Holland, which is
and there's a difference between welfare programs, which I'm still not a fan of because it is socialistic in a way, but it's not full on. Like I think Social Security should go away. I hate Social Security. I know we relied on it, but that was an FDR attempted, putting social things. So FDR sucked. I hate FDR. He's one of my least favorite presidents of all time. I only give him credit for having dictatorial power and then giving it back. That's my biggest credit to him.
So the US economy would not be growing strongly if it weren't for Social Security. We would be hoarding money like the Japanese and the Chinese who don't have very effective, the Chinese especially don't have an effective social system, social safety net. So, that's a different issue, but what's happened in so many of these countries, like let's pick Holland. I lived in Holland for several years. They spend as much per capita on healthcare, and they have a socialized healthcare system. The government spends about $5,000 per person.
Yeah.
The US spends about $5,000 per person from the federal government.
It's interesting.
But in our system, that money only goes to the poorest people and the oldest people who need support from the government because they can't buy, their own healthcare.
Yeah.
Older people, it's just not a profitable business for a company. And poor people, they don't have any money to pay for it. In Holland, the same amount of money is spent, but it's spent on everybody, so they get less.
Now, does it also have to do with the fact that they're a much more homogenous people too, and it kind of helps to kind of have an understanding of what the general health of the population is going to be?
They're not very homogenous anymore. They were at one point.
Used to be. The Scandinavians and stuff were very protective, and now they're not. Well,
they're not.
I mean, Sweden is doing everything they can to push the Muslims out right now. Like they let so many of them in, and they've been making so many policies to be like, get out.
They're paying people to leave.
And I think
we're trying to do that too. We just upped it $3,000 to self-deport.
I mean, that's fantastic though, because the thing is, this is where people are looking at going, oh, they're sending them 3,000. They mapped out how much it costs in order for a major deportation action per person, and they've decided what number works for it.
Yes.
People think they're arbitrarily pulling these numbers out. They're not. They are just sitting there looking at, okay, if we have 20,000 people, 20 million people we need to get out, if we spend 3,000 on all of them, it's cheaper than having to send our law enforcement to pull them out.
Absolutely. And then you got to detain them. You got to feed them while they're in. You got to pay for all their flights.
If they get sick, you have to care for them.
That's just our way. That's right. That's the way we do it. So no, 3,000. I think actually probably 10,000 is probably a better price to pay. And we'd still make a lot of money. Save a lot of money that way. So one of my pet peeves here. Let's talk about immigration. So my wife is a first generation Hispanic immigrant. Mm-hmm. When we as Americans talk about immigration, we use the words in a way that confuses people who are just here.
Yeah.
We're talking about getting people who are not supposed to be here, illegal aliens, out of the country.
Yes.
But a lot of immigrants here, they mistakenly hear we don't like immigrants.
I think that's also because you have a lot of assholes that aren't necessarily on the right. They are your collectivist left that plays as the right.
Absolutely. They are claiming that. And it really scares a lot of people. And remember, there are about 3 or 4 times more legal immigrants in America than there are illegal immigrants. And so one of my pet peeves on TikTok, and you'll see me talk about this sometimes, is when someone comes into my comments and confuses illegal alien and immigrant.
Yep.
Illegal aliens are not immigrants.
No.
Immigrants come through the front door. Illegal aliens have snuck in.
Off. They spend a lot of money. They spend 8 years of studying. They work their tails off, which is why some of the coolest events of all time is when you see individuals becoming American citizens. And those people, there's people crying. There is genuine happiness because, and my thing is too, I want to make it harder. I don't want to make people like we should make it easier. No, it should be the hardest thing in the world should be becoming an American citizen, because once you get that ability, if you buy in, even with all of our problems now, you still have the best chance in the world of making something of yourself here. So for me, it's like, oh, we should make the pathway easier. No, we should make it harder. Like we should make it significantly harder. And the thing is too, it's like your wife did it the right way. My grandparents both did it the right way, from Ecuador and from Italy. I mean, it's and they're the ones that are rallying against us even more. I'm a second generation. For me, I consider myself, I'm fully American. I know there's some people like, oh, I'm American, period. And I've started celebrating Indigenous Peoples Day because I'm a friggin' Indigenous person, and I want the conservatives to fully rip that away. If you were born here, you're an Indigenous person, period. I'm going to take that from them. Screw that. And I'm also a Native American. I don't care anymore. Like, I was born here. This is mine just as much as any friggin' Indian tribe ever was. We are equal. That's my theory.
Do you know how Columbus ended?
Christopher Columbus?
Yeah.
I know he made many a trip here, and he friggin' loved the indigenous people. He was like one of their best friends.
So he and his brother tried to enslave some Native Americans. Mm-hmm. They also, one of the Spanish settlers, she told them they were trashy, and they cut out her tongue.
Oh.
So when the Spanish king and queen, Isabel and Ferdinand, heard about this, they sent someone to the New World, and they brought Christopher Columbus and his brother back in chains and put them in the dungeon, and then kept them there for a while, and then stripped them of all their noble titles and lands. And they died in basically penniless and in disgrace, because they had violated the Christian values so deeply. And Ferdinand and Isabel in Spain are known as the Reyes Católicos, the Catholic royals.
Yeah,
heavy Catholics.
Heavy Catholic. Very much in the faith.
They saw the New World as a gift from God, because they had just finished the longest war in human history. And, in the Bible, it says, if you've been faithful with little, I will make you faithful with much. I will give you much more responsibility.
Mhm.
So the same year that they reclaimed their country as a Christian country
Mhm.
is the same year that Columbus discovered the Americas. So their mission was literally to convert the Native Americans, to spread the gospel.
Imagine
And
if
and that
Spain
was their
wasn't the
goal.
country that did that, because they did a fantastic job in South
They
America.
did.
South
They
America
did.
became so Christian. Then, the communists definitely got a strong stranglehold in there in modern history. But initially, God, South America still has an incredibly heavy Christian presence. And it was
It does.
because, the Spanish, and, I didn't know about the unfortunate end of Christopher Columbus. I did know a lot of his missives and a lot of his travels then and back. Like he befriended a lot of the Native American people,
He
and they
did. He
befriended
did. He
him. They
did.
were
He did.
they were close. And that's another thing about a lot of the misrepresentations of the conquistadors. And yes, we learn about some of the brutal ones, but a lot of the conquistadors that came over from Spain, and even they came and they knew they weren't stupid people. Like, we always like to infantilize so many of the individuals that were back then. They weren't going to trust a dunce to be an explorer. They weren't going to trust an
No.
idiot to take their state of the art ships up to 3,000 miles on water and then go and try and do the mission of their crown, wherever there was Dutch, Spanish, English. These guys were highly intelligent. They were, they understood what their mission was, and they also understood, okay, we can't just kill everyone we meet. We need to, if we want to survive, if we want to settle, we need to figure this out. And they also learned from the mistakes of the Vikings, from the
Yes,
Vinland
they
Saga,
did.
because the Vinland Saga was a very well known
Yeah.
thing throughout all of Europe. Because, I knew about the Vinland Saga. I learned more about it because the Japanese turned it into a freaking awesome anime.
That
It's
is
been
a great anime. Yeah, I've seen it. Yeah,
really
it
good,
is.
the
It is
Vinland
really
Saga,
good. It's really
and
good. No, it's really good.
it obviously embellishes the story of Thorfinn, but
Sure,
a
but
lot, everything else there is pretty much accurate. And I mean, learning about the humbleness of Thorfinn when he becomes a slave, that's all in the Vinland Saga and things like that. And a lot of your explorers learned from the mistakes of Leif Erikson, from Thorfinn, from these things, and understood, okay, Leif Erikson was kind of flaky. He went there, he went back, he wasn't, he figured out a lot of stuff, but he was awesome. Thorfinn was too much of a pacifist. You needed to be able to defend yourself. Okay, we need to have some sort of defense involved while also making treaties, because these people aren't fully, they're not savages. They're not,
right,
they can
right.
be. Thorfinn had so many missives about the great relations he was starting to have with some of those people. So, um, caveat to saying anime or manga. The manga is really good, but the anime is very faithful as well. I've read the manga and everything too. So you're dealing with the true nerd here, Stephen. But it's interesting. That's also a part of history we don't study, right? The Europeans studied the mistakes of the Vikings in terms of trying to go, they weren't ignorant that there was another place that existed. They knew. They wanted to go there. Now, the mistake of, okay, they were trying to get to the Indies. That is kind of a thing that was a goal. They wanted those spices, but they weren't complete rubes that there was another continent that potentially existed. They didn't
Yeah.
completely not know. They understood. And I mean, we
There
infantilize past so much.
there had been stories from English and Portuguese fishermen for ages
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
probably were from the New World. Um,
Yes.
People also tend to forget that when Cortez conquered the Aztecs, his army was 99% Native American.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I mean, you think of the French and Indian War in America. It was
Yep.
essentially the Indian tribes fighting each other, and then the French and the British just riling them up. That's all that was. Like,
That's what
there
it
wasn't
was.
that many British regulars in the colonies, and
Mm.
Washington writes about it. Like, we are, if it weren't for our allies that knew the land significantly better than we're, and it was two Indian tribes trying to one up each other. They were already at war. They were just like, okay, give us some modern stuff so we can kill them. And that's all the French and the English essentially did. But there's so many of those stories. Like you said, like Cortez traded, befriended, and I mean, they wanted the Aztecs gone. The Aztecs were subjugating everybody.
Well,
Like,
and they were actually invaders too. The Aztecs were not
yeah,
native to central Mexico. They
no.
came down from nobody knows exactly where, but somewhere further north in what's now the US.
Yep. And there was also, and they were probably pushed away from some of the other strong tribes, your Seminoles, your
That's
Cherokees,
probably true.
your,
That's probably
and
true.
because, and that's the
Yeah.
other thing too. It's like, while there were a lot of peaceful individuals. There were so many warlike tribes, though. They were the Native Americans will tell you they knew what time it was when it was that time, right? When it was time for peace, we were peaceful. When it was time to go, we went. Like that's the way they lived.
So here in Texas, of course, we've got the Spanish missions, right? The
Yes.
World Heritage Site, and the Alamo is one of those. The missions originally had walls around them, and one of the missions, San Jose, still has walls around it. Why were there walls? Right? The walls were because the Comanche would raid all the other Native Americans. So the first thing the Spanish missionaries did was they said, look, we're going to help you build a wall and we're going to be protected inside. And they offered
The damn white
protection
man
to
always
these Native
building their
American tribes.
walls.
They offered them protection. And then they taught them everything they knew technologically, reading and writing, ironworking, agricultural techniques, right?
Mm-hmm.
They gave them some of the greatest aspects of Western culture technologically at that time, which were farm animals. We don't think of that as a technology, but they didn't have a lot of domesticated animals in the New World. In Mexico, they had domesticated turkeys and I think a kind of a duck, and that was it. In the Andes,
the horse
they
being
had
brought over
llamas
was
and things,
massive.
but yeah, it was massive.
The horse wasn't native to the spots that they landed on the east, and the wild horses of this country were damn near unbreakable at the time. So they brought over broken horses from Europe.
So the horse actually evolved in North America, and then it came to Europe and Asia over the land bridge, and then it went extinct in the New World, and then was reintroduced by the Europeans. So it literally went all the way around the world in about 10,000 years.
It's crazy. It's funny too.
I was just gonna say that's why they went wild so easily. Is that they loved it? Is that they were originally from here? Yeah,
that's so cool. And again, the parts of history and learning about the migration patterns of different things, and that humans aren't very different in terms of how we migrate, how we went places.
I'm running out of battery, Alex.
All right, so you're running out of battery, so we will end this. You are Dr. Sweater, Stephen Mitchell. I want to go and promote you real quick. Everybody go to his TikTok and go find him over there at Dr. Sweater. And I also want everybody to go to his YouTube and do this. Boom. Subscribe. And lastly, if you have any more battery, explain what Jubilant Reader is.
So back in the pandemic, when we were homeschooling our youngest daughter, I'm the one who taught her to read, and I wanted software that would help, and I didn't like what was out there. So I wrote this. I wrote this myself. It's 30,000 lines of code. I wrote every single one. And it's really good if you've got kids who are learning to read. We've got testimonials from moms and all kinds of stuff.
Can this also be used in schools? Do you have things that schools can also use as for modules and stuff?
Schools can use this, but it's primarily being used right now by parents.
Kind of an answer to like Hooked on Phonics and things like that, like a similar thing.
It's a much more serious version of that. It's still fun for kids, but Hooked on Phonics and ABC Mouse, those are really just video games that don't really help your kid. This actually helps kids.
I love it. So everybody go to Jubilant Reader. And if you're having a child that's learning and struggling and doing that, go ahead and jump on that to get that. So before your battery runs out, Stephen,
thank you.
I appreciate you, man. This was a ton of fun.
Thank you. I enjoyed it.
So once again, we appreciate everyone that's watching. We will be back next week, whether it's YouTube X, Facebook, Kick, Rumble. Make sure you smash the like button and subscribe. And also, make sure you go find Dr. Sweater wherever you are. TikTok, like I said, he's a ton of fun. I love watching him. He pops up all the time. So everyone, thank you so much. I'll be back next week. Bye, y'all.